welcome to you all here. So we are going to talk about the exciting topic of, make sure I'm at the right place, I'm going to go back one. This is a new speech that I literally wrote on the weekend, and then also my designer got really excited about it, so you're going to have to bear with me with some of her slides. Right, we're going to talk about the role of social media and political polarisation, but also all the other things that are contributing to it. So I want to begin by asking a simple question. Have you noticed that political conversations online, at work, or even around the family dinner table are a little bit more combative, a bit more emotional, and frankly, a lot more fucking exhausting than they were 20 years ago? And if your answer to that is yes, you are not imagining it. It is true. Across democracies, from Washington to Canberra, we're witnessing a sharp rise in political polarisation. It's no longer just a matter of differing opinions. Increasingly, we see those with opposing views as not just wrong, but as immoral, dangerous, and even unpatriotic. There are many causes, but one of the most powerful accelerants has been right in our hands the whole time. Phones have changed the way we consume news, and that's part of the problem as well. In the old days, like, you picked up a newspaper and you kind of read it, and so you consumed stuff that wasn't necessarily the stuff you're interested in, and you got opinions that weren't necessarily ones that aligned to you. That's just how you consumed news. Now we click on the bad stuff first. It's probably a survival thing, but we do click on the bad stuff first, and often, sometimes that's the only stuff we click on. And part of the problem with that is it means we're constantly in a state of angst, much more so than we used to be. And I hear from people all the time, they're like, oh, it's a much more dangerous world for our children now. And it's actually not. But because they're only reading the bad stuff, it feels like it is. So we're all kind of a little bit more emotionally anxious than we were, which is kind of a bad place to be and easy for polarisation to happen. We click, we skim, and most often, as I said, we click on the bad stuff. And the bad stuff, of course, gets the clicks, and the clicks sell ads, kind of like that bit, and those ads fund the newsrooms because often you're not paying for a paper now, so the way that they pay the journalists is with clicks. So outrage, fear and anger, they all pay the bills. And then, of course, came the apps and the algorithms that decide what we see. So when social media first emerged, it was going to be this massive force for good. Collaboration, connection and access to information on a scale the world had never seen. People could reconnect with old friends, communicate across borders and amplify their voices with just a tap of a finger. And it did some good things. It gave rise to movements like Arab Spring, where grassroots activism used platforms to mobilise and challenge autocratic regimes. It bridged distances, facilitated global dialogues and powered campaigns to fight injustices. And it still does all of those things. But like all tools, its impact depends not only on the hands of those who wield it, but on the systems that govern it. And these platforms are not neutral town squares. They're profit-driven ecosystems designed to maximise engagement. Their primary goal is to keep you scrolling, liking, commenting and sharing for as long as possible. And the best way to keep people engaged, as we all know in advertising, is with emotion. Research shows content that provokes anger, outrage, and fear is more likely to be shared, and that is not a glitch, it's the feature. Algorithms prioritise what hooks us, and bizarrely what hooks us isn't calm, measured discourse. It's tribalism, fear and fury. For example, if you spend a few minutes watching a video critiquing climate change policy, you're pretty likely then to be shown another video that says climate change is a hoax. What the algorithms do is get the bit that interests you and move you one way or another, and that's how filter bubbles form. Our feeds reflect and reinforce what we already believe, obviously. Add algorithmic bias to our confirmation bias and you get what's called the reinforcement cycle. And confirmation bias, as you all probably know, is seeking out information that aligns with the stuff that we already believe and dismiss anything that challenges it. And social media platforms reinforce the biases and the cycle of polarisation tightens further. So what once might have been spirited conversations at dinner tables or thoughtful debates amongst friends now devolve into echo chambers and flame wars. It's not just discourse that suffers, trust erodes, people begin to doubt institutions, the media and even evidence-based truth. Our worldview narrows, our certainty hardens and our tolerance for dissent collapses. The consequences go far beyond online arguments. Political compromise becomes weakness. Facts become opinions, misinformation becomes mobilisation, and sometimes online rhetoric spills into real-world violence. When we think about our social media, on Facebook, because it was the first platform, we probably have the broadest selection of people from the very beginning. But since then, we tend to just friend people on any platform who tend to agree with us. In America, we can see that Trump supporters mostly hear from Trump supporters. Progressives mostly follow other progressives. It's pretty the same here. One study found that only 25% of news shared by Democrats is ever seen via Republicans and vice versa. And we've known for decades that when people surround themselves with like-minded people, their views become more extreme. It's called group polarisation, and the internet has supercharged it. And what happens is the loudest, most extreme voices dominate, and the moderates, who kind of just don't want to be in this argumentative space, go silent. And the silence creates distortion. We start to believe that the other side is more extreme than it really is, because they're the only voices you hear from the other side. And this is called false polarisation, which ironically becomes real polarisation. And on social media, it spreads like wildfire. And polarisation isn't just a byproduct of attention economics. It's a strategy, and it is a weapon. It's used to maintain power, to block inclusion, and to stop diversity threatening the status quo. Because power isn't infinite. It is a cake. There is only so much of it. And those who hold it, the pale, the male, and the stale, know that sharing it actually does mean losing some of it. And polarisation works because it taps into something primal. If I win, you lose. It's always been a powerful campaign tool. People are motivated far more by what they'll lose than what they'll gain. And anger drives action. I know with elections, everyone's like, why do you do negatives? Why do you do negative ads? I just want to see the positives. Because negative ads work. That's why. In countries without compulsory voting, like the US, it's gold because you don't need to win the middle. You actually just need to get your base to turn out. And that's why even centrists within the Republican movement end up supporting Donald Trump, because the polarisation moves the centre, or essentially it's so quiet it feels like it's disappeared. If you want to see how polarisation, threatens democracy and diversity, you just have to look at Nazi Germany, the voice referendum, 2 Trump elections and the erosion of women's rights, Pauline Hanson, Andrew Tate. And the scary thing is it's getting easier because the algorithm rewards anger, and every time we engage, we feed it. We've seen how these dynamics have fuelled misinformation campaigns, election interference around the globe, acts of hate and lawlessness. Democracies in particular require informed citizens capable of engaging with a diversity of perspectives. And when polarisation runs unchecked, the fundamental pillars of democracy begin to crack. There's a political scientist in America who describes a phenomenon called mega identity. And she describes how, not that very long ago, like in the 1950s, probably a little bit of time ago, but not that long, the parties in America, the Republicans and Democrats, were pretty evenly, they were pretty hard to tell apart, both demographically and ideologically. Like the black vote was split evenly between the two. So was the white vote. The same held for men, for Catholics, for Unionists. They were that similar. And then came what she calls the Great Sorting, which is in the wake of civil rights, women's movement, Roe versus Wade. The Republicans became whiter, more church-going and more male. And by the early 1990s and by the 2010s, the differences between the two parties were significant. So they've gone from two parties that were a little bit different in a lot of ways to two parties that are very different in a few powerful ways. And as the two parties sorted socially, they also drifted apart ideologically. And the Great Sorting in America has led to this really political asymmetry. So in America, their political system is built around geographic units, and they privilege sparse rural areas over dense urban areas. So in a sense, the rural areas get more representation. And the effect is most obvious in the US Senate, where each voter in Wyoming, for example, enjoys for all intents and purposes 70 times the clout of her counterpart in California. So the Republicans, with overrepresented rural counties on their side, can afford to move a lot further from the centre than the Democrats can. So their geographic advantage means they can run campaigns aimed at a voter well to the right of most Americans to win. And Democrats don't just need to appeal to voters in the middle, but they also need to appeal to those on the right as well, which makes it a really tricky campaign. So Republicans have lost the popular vote in the past 6 of the 7 presidential elections, but obviously won a couple of those elections. So the popular vote is kind of almost irrelevant. And by now, party, faith, race, and even TV viewing habits are all correlated. One study showed that the top 20 shows enjoyed by Republicans was completely different to the top 20 shows enjoyed by Democrats. And Mason argues that Americans no longer juggle several potentially conflicting group identities. They associate with one all-encompassing group, which confers what she calls a mega identity. And when that mega identity is challenged, those people get mega upset. She puts it that we've got more self-esteem real estate to protect as our identities are linked together. There was a famous psychologist in the 1960s, Henry Tajfel, who showed just how easy it is to create us versus them conflict, even with meaningless groups. In a series of now famous experiments, he divided participants into groups, and in some they were told that they were sorted according to whether they under or over-represented the number of dots on a screen. In other groups they were told it was completely random, but it didn't actually matter. They ended up beginning to favour members of their own group no matter what. And when he asked them to allocate money to the other participants, they consistently gave less to those in the other group. And this happened even when they were told that if they handed out the money evenly, everyone would get more. So given a choice between maximising the benefits to both groups or depriving both groups but depriving the other group of even more, they chose the latter. It's the winning that was important. It's fair to say that Donald Trump has probably never read Tajfel's work, but he seems to have intuitively grasped it. He frequently changes his position on policy, but the one thing he never wavers on is the importance of winning. This is an exact quote from him from a rally in Albany. We're going to win at every level. We're going to win so much you may even get tired of winning. So he didn't need consistent policies, he just needed an enemy. Fake news, build the wall, stop the steal. They're not policies, but they are triggers. And social media amplified them. And he used the old advertising trick of finding the most motivating trigger for a target market. And I hear a lot of people say, well, why are all these fundamentalist Christians voting for, a thrice divorced adulteress who likes to grab pussy? And the answer to that goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you like. It goes back to abortion. Now, for these people who believe abortion is killing babies, that trumps, no pun intended, that trumps everything that Trump has done, because they are voting for him to save lives. So it's kind of at the top of their thing. And with America, the link between politics and the appointment of judges means it's actually a very real thing who's in. So that is why they vote for him. After the 2016 campaign, Facebook copped a lot of flack because it was criticised for helping spread misinformation, much of it by sort of Russian-backed fake accounts. So in 2018, they released a new algorithm, and I think anyone who's worked in Facebook ads knows that likes stopped being a thing that helped your algorithm, and the engagement had to be on comments and how much comments came on a post. The new system has proved to be worse than the old. As perhaps should have been anticipated, the posts that tended to prompt the most reactions were the most politically provocative. So the new algorithm thus produced a kind of vicious cycle. The more outrage a post inspired, the more it was promoted, and so on. Even more emotional content, even more rage. Every angry post, every retweet gave Trump more oxygen. And that's the paradox of social media polarisation. The more we push back, the louder it gets. Now, Australia has long seen itself as sort of pragmatic and centrist, but signs of polarisation are here too. In 2019, Labor focused on climate change policies, and up here in Queensland, the coalition reframed them as a threat to coal jobs and communities. And Facebook targeted ads, to voters with messages about Labor's supposed war on coal. And the messages didn't need to be nuanced, they just needed to provoke, and it worked. Fear of job loss, fear of outsiders, fear of change. And more recently, during the 2023 Voice to Parliament, misinformation spread so rapidly through Telegram and Facebook. Claims the voice would lead to land seizures, create a third chamber of parliament. They were widely debunked, but it didn't matter. The speed and scale of their spread made fact-checking nearly impossible. And in the end, of course, facts didn't matter because it was never about facts. It was about feelings, and algorithms reward emotion and not accuracy. And in Australia, of course, our media ownership plays a role because even before algorithms entered the picture, we had a pretty concentrated viewpoint. But let's be honest, it's really easy to, blame the right for polarisation, and I think the left needs to take a good, long, hard look at it itself too, because the left, instead of doing things like normalising diversity and driving inclusion, we tend to overcorrect, and it polarises. So take body positivity. When is it acceptance, and when is it promoting unhealthy weight? Now, those are questions people should be able to ask, but if you ask that online, why do you hate fat people? We moralise and we shut down debate. The left can be guilty of intolerance disguised as progressivism. So when Bob Brown, I don't know if many of you remember, Bob Brown decided it was a genius idea to do a climate convoy or something up to the Queensland coal towns. And I have lived my life in Queensland focus groups, and I can tell you most Queenslanders believed in climate change. What they didn't believe in was a bunch of Southerners come up to tell them they're terrible people for working in coal mines when they're just paying the mortgage and putting food on, the kids' table, and it's the only job in town. And I saw how that polarised, how people stopped supporting climate change, not because they didn't believe in it, but because they felt like they were made out to be the bad guys. The left tends to dismiss people for saying the wrong thing. We create purity tests with feminism and LGBTQI rights. It's like, if you don't do it exactly the way I say, you're a bad feminist, you're not an ally. It alienates and it drives people away and not towards change. And when debate is shut down, it doesn't vanish. It just moves to chat rooms where it goes unchecked. There is a difference between robust debate and polarisation. It's a small one, but a vital one. Yes, people's rights shouldn't be up for debate, but sometimes to bring people along, we need pragmatism over purity. If we sit on our moral high horse, always trying to be right, we aren't helping. We're actually hardening the divide. Compulsory voting helps here. It's so important in Australia because elections are still won in the middle. And I think, we've seen with this election when parties move to one side or the other and vacate the middle space, they do not get rewarded. And I'd like to keep it that way because I like Labor in power. Polarisation is also evolving. AI is now generating campaign content, writing speeches, policy blurbs, even fake videos. And bots manipulate trends and amplify lies. Australia hasn't seen the same scale of disinformation as the US, but the tools exist. And our Electoral Commission is trying to catch up, but the rules around things like AI-generated content and foreign actors is still a little bit fuzzy. This isn't just a political problem, it's a psychological one. What does this do to us personally? Studies show that increasing political polarisation, as I said, correlates with declining trust, not just in institutions and the media, but with each other. We actually start losing faith with our neighbours. And in the US, polling showed that nearly 4 in 10 people view members of supporters of the other political party as a threat to their country. And here in Australia, the numbers aren't quite so stark, but the trajectory is similar. We're more likely than ever to describe our political opponents as dangerous, selfish, or un-Australian. The tribal mindset makes compromise harder. It turns policy debate into zero-sum games, and it breeds cynicism, especially amongst younger people who start to look at politics as a toxic space rather than a tool for positive change. And when we see our neighbours as not just wrong, but dangerous, we lose more than just civil debate. We lose democracy's foundation, which is a belief that different people can find common ground. Here's the good news, though. It isn't inevitable. We built the systems. We can reshape them. I get asked a lot about truth in political advertising. Is that sort of the magic bullet? I'm actually unconvinced of that because most of the misinformation doesn't happen in the ads. It happens in the unregulated spaces. To get an ad on TV, you've still got to get it through CAD. You still have to prove it. We're always going to say things on one side the other side doesn't think is right, but an election is essentially a contest of ideas. And I also think from the advertising industry's point of view, who wants to be deciding in the middle of an election campaign whether an ad is correct or not? Wouldn't certainly want to be doing that. So I feel like the danger with truth in political advertising is people will think it's solving a problem and it's actually not. But I do think we need to build guardrails for AI. We need better platform accountability. They just can't get away with the fact now that they're just publishers. They're just a platform, they're not publishers. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that anymore. But always, I think media literacy is really important to teach people, not just kids but adults, how to spot manipulative content, how to check sources, how to step outside their algorithmic echo chambers. I constantly say to my kids, no, just because you saw something on TikTok doesn't make it a fact. And we need politicians to resist the temptation to chase engagement at the expense of unity. Leaders set the tone. They can choose to amplify division or build bridges.
What do you say to the opposition claims that you're too soft, that you're too wishy-washy? Do we need more of a hard man as a leader?
It's just rhetoric. Kindness isn't weakness.
Joining us today.
I thought that was a really nice moment in the campaign. So lastly, as citizens, we need to take some responsibility as well, and that means thinking twice before we share the incendiary meme. It means seeking out views we agree with, not to argue, but to understand. And sometimes it means logging off for a little while. I feel like there should be something on your mobile phones where, like a little thing that comes out, if you blow over 0.05, you're not allowed to get in political debates with anyone or contact any of your exes. I feel like if someone wants to, do that as a thing, I think you'd make a lot of money. So we can choose to engage with thoughtfulness rather than anger, and to seek conversations instead of silos, and to recognise the humanity, even in those who hold opposing views. Except for Nazis, they're an exception to everything. So challenge your algorithm. Think about following some diverse voices. Pause before posting and fact check first. And I think assume positive intent. Most people aren't assholes, some of them are. So let me leave you with this. Social media didn't create political division, but it's amplified it, it's monetised it, and it has globalised it. And it's turned democracy into a spectacle and made us all participants, whether we intend to be or not. But democracy is not a game to be won with clicks and shares. It is a fragile, ongoing conversation that demands curiosity, humility, and a willingness to listen, especially to those we disagree with. Yes, there are bad faith actors out there, but they're not most people. So if someone uses the wrong word or says something misguided, don't assume malice. We're all learning, and a little kindness can go a long way. As Pink rightly said, sometimes the need to be right comes at way too high a cost. So the future of our relationships, democracies and societies depend on our ability to have civil dialogue with people amidst differences. And social media may be a new frontier, but the values that guide us through this challenge are as old as civil society itself: empathy, curiosity and respect. There are virtues, these are virtues no algorithm can replicate, but every heart is capable of. So we know that algorithms will probably continue to do their job. The question is, will we? Because democracy doesn't die in darkness, it dies in the comments section. Thank you.